This is Patrick Durkin from the Wellness Enterprise, and I had a most interesting dialogue with a gentleman named Steve Sinatra over the last, I'd say, 3 or 4 weeks. Maybe it was a little longer. And in that time, Steve and I went deep into a number of topics. And what I loved about the process of what happened for Steve is that through our discussions, Steve discerned for himself what was his truth around water. And I found that to be a really compelling and interesting story. So I asked Steve if he would be kind enough, now that he's kind of settled in on the end of the process, to go back with us and talk a little bit about what happened. He graciously agreed, so I have him on the line today. And Steve, first of all, thanks for being here with me. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
And so, what I really want to do is I want to let your authentic experience out to people so that they can have the opportunity to see and hear for themselves parts that are relevant to them, so they can also be empowered the way you've been through this process. So maybe we just, start at the beginning, and could you tell us when you first became aware of structured water and what you did?
So I was learning about water and kind of became aware of the ability to structure water back in August. And that's when I decided to take my first venture into purchasing something to try and structure water myself. And that's when I purchased a portable Natural Actions structured watering filter. And I was pairing that when I was at home with a Berkey water system. And the reason I got the portable is because I'm a traveling musician a lot of the times, and I wanted to be able to do this while I was on the move and be drinking the highest quality water that I could. So that was where it all started for me.
Yeah, that's great. And for people that are listening years from now or whenever it is, today is April 1st, so Steve's first purchase was back in August, just to put a timeline on it. And what did you think about having a structured water device?
It was really interesting. At first I wasn't sure about it, and what kind of led me to it was the book knowledge, so to speak, of what was happening rather than the experiential knowledge. Actually, no, I take that back. Before I even purchased and learned about structuring water, I had an experience that I think was very relevant that I left out. I had the opportunity to go to Mount Shasta up in Northern California, and I got to drink some water that came off of the glaciers of Mount Shasta, filtered through the earth. And there's a park that has the headwater of, I believe, the Sacramento River. And I got to put my water bottle right into the headwater, fill it up, and drink water right out of the headwater. And for the first time in my life, I felt water affecting me physically in a positive, beautiful way. And that was kind of the launching point prior to the other stuff that I had mentioned earlier.
The story with you just keeps deepening and deepening. I didn't know that about you, and Mount Shasta is definitely on my bucket list, so it's really cool that you've had the opportunity to be there.
Yeah, it was a really beautiful experience. I read a book just to go on a slight offshoot that inspired me to go there, and I learned a lot of really cool information that I resonated with about what's really going on inside Earth, and that it's not what I was taught in a typical history book that I grew up, reading in school. That there's a lot more depth to that, and one of the supposed entrance points into, according to the book I read, some underground cities in Earth exists at Mount Shasta. So that was kind of my inspiration for going there, which doesn't initially have anything to do with water, but then I as one of the many wonderful experiences that happened surrounding that trip, water being a big gift on top of what I already wanted to go and learn about. I had that multiple amazing experiences, and the one at the Sacramento headwater happened, and that kind of is what spawned everything else that we had already talked about up until this point.
That's great. Well, I definitely think that experiences in nature, I've had them in a little pueblo with some great waterfalls in South America, in Colombia, at the Niagara Falls, and at Zion National Park out in Utah. And I'm finding that the experiences in nature are the most powerful structured water experiences that I've had. And it's kind of humbled me a little bit around the technologies that I represent, in terms of noticing that it's the natural experience that is the top of the heap. It's the one I aspire to the most. And what we're doing with our technologies is we're doing our best to emulate that. And the science of structured water has been around. Largely, I guess it's given credit to Victor Schauberger, so something like 100 years ago. And now we have devices that can be used in our homes to mimic, replicate those natural experiences. So I think it's cool to remind people that actually going to nature and having the experience directly is a great way to become sensitized and awakened and aware about how powerful it is. So it's great that you had that experience. So there you were, drinking your Natural Action Portable, and at some point, how did the Jivara technology cross your path?
So I was based and out of my career and living in Nashville, Tennessee, and was using my Natural Actions filter with my Berkey, and that was fantastic, and I was really enjoying that. Was able to take it around with me, which was really handy in my particular case. And then, there was a lot of other lifestyle changes that were kind of taking place at the time between when I bought that Natural Actions filter and today, and in that process, one of the many things that happened was moving to Los Angeles in the last 2 months or so. And I made a conscious decision moving forward that I wanted to up my structured water game a little bit in the new place that I was going to be moving into. I didn't want to just have the Natural Actions Portable and the Berkey. I was, coming into the knowledge of how powerful water can be, and I wanted it to be in my shower, and I wanted it to be at my under sink unit, and basically kind of covering all of my ground in the flow of how I lived in my new place, because I was more deeply understanding how important it really was to me, and wanted to give energy to that.
I love what you're saying. It speaks to a word that I like to use a lot around this to help people go deeper, which is immersion. Right? And what I'm saying is, whether you get just a portable device or you decide to, as you call it, up your game and get it on your sink and your shower, the important thing is that you immerse yourself in water, not that you drink 1 or 2 or 3 glasses a day, but that you spread it in as many places as possible. And so that means if you don't have a shower unit, then maybe you choose to take a bath and you structure it with your portable. It means that you give it to your plants. It means that you take a moment throughout the day to be aware of the energy of the water that you're doing. It becomes a co-creative dance. And that's what I've done, I think, more than most people, is like I've really immersed my life in water. And the more I do so, the deeper it goes, and the more love and inspiration and creativity I find. So it's really fun to hear you describing it in these terms, and how that was your intention, and that I think that was awakened perhaps by the Mount Shasta and the Natural Action Portable experiences, and you were ready for more.
Yes, it absolutely was. So to kind of go back and also move forward in the conversation, one of the things that happened after that Mount Shasta experience and drinking that water, there had been an energy healer who I had been seeing every couple months or so. And one of the questions that came up because of how powerful the experience was what happened that made me feel the way that I did when I drank that water. and he kind of explained and elaborated a little bit on what it was, but ultimately kind of coming into that knowledge of, that the water was alive and it was doing something in my body and why that was happening. And then that's what made me seek out, what you were talking about, the ways that through science we've learned how to recreate that experience when I'm not in nature, have the luxury of being in nature. And this energy healer is someone whose opinion I value very much. And as it'll show up later in the conversation, I'm sure is a key piece to the story. And I wanted to kind of just bring that in a little bit right now.
Yeah. So you set out with this intention, and with that going in the background, so you're pretty open to alternatives. And what happened next?
So I decided to up my water game, like we were talking about before, and I went to see what products were available that would fit my needs, and just to learn about what was on the market at this point in time, which might not have been before. And that's when I learned about the Jivara stuff and became very interested in that. Now, I would definitely say that I tend to gravitate towards the nicer things. So there's that going on. I know that these items are on the higher price point of what is available out there. But the thing that really was attracting me to it was the fact that there's crystal technology in it, that there's sacred geometry in it, all things that I was also aware about and understood how much of an impact that also had on the water. So that's when you and I started talking, because I wanted to learn more about those products and see how I could structure, pun intended, my setup in my apartment to make it as best I could. And we kind of put a package together for me that made the most sense, and it ended up being the Jivara 3-in-1 and the under sink unit. And I was spending a lot of my apartment budget, on something that maybe not everybody would want to do, but it was really important to me. And in the process of all that, I was kind of sharing that with my energy healer somewhere down the road after having made that purchase, and asking him what he intuitively was seeing as far as the workflow of how I was setting things up. And what I mean by that was using the under sink, or let me backtrack a little bit. How I was using the portable is that I would get regular tap water, pour it into the Berkey filter, and it would filter through the Berkey. And then when I was ready to drink water or use the water out of the Berkey system, I would get a glass of water and filter it through my natural actions filter. So the water was structuring immediately when I would be drinking it after it had been filtered. Now, with the two filters that I had purchased, in the way that I was thinking about restructuring how I was how I was going to use my filters, it was going to be a little bit different. It was going to go through coming off the tap, it was going to go through the under sink Jivara and be structured, and then it was going to get put into the Berkey filter and then sit there for however long until I decided I was ready to drink water. And one of the questions that came to my mind was, how long does the structure of water last? And I asked my energy healer about that, and he shared with me that when he was kind of testing for me what he was getting, he said that the water only remained structured for me for 6 hours. And that's when I kind of called you, and maybe you want to interject a little bit about kind of, the conversation that we had from that point.
Well, it's not unusual to have somebody receive a device and have something come up that is different than what they expected or what they thought. So here it was, you had purchased 2 Jivara units, and you left me a message saying you wanted to return one of them. I was like, oh, I'm curious, like what's going to happen in this conversation with Steve? And it was one of my favorite conversations. Like from there to the end of this story is really why I called you and asked you to do this recording. I mean, the rest of it's all great too, but I'm so dedicated to empowerment for people. And what I witnessed with you was, in my view, empowerment. Do you experience it the same way?
Yes, I definitely would agree with you on that.
Yeah, so we got together and talked, and you shared with me that your go-to resource in energy healing was saying that the structure of water was diminishing quickly, and given that, that was throwing off your intended plan of having the water sit in your Berkey already structured. Is that right?
Yes, that's accurate.
Okay, so now's where I need your help on the details because I told you they kind of blended into the past for me already. So what happened in that call? So I shared with you that the structure of water lasts a lot longer than the 6 hours that this other person was saying.
Correct. When I shared that information with you, you said, I respect your resources, but you said that you respectfully disagreed. And you pointed me in the direction of a wealth of knowledge that I had yet to come into of tests that had been done using the Jivara, and maybe you have it for the natural actions filter, but I was particularly interested in the units that I had, but you had a wealth of scientific data listed on your website about tests that have been done that showed that after structuring the water and testing it 25 hours later, that the water was still remaining structured. So that kind of left me really confused and not quite sure what to do other than take that information that also seemed like it had validity to it and go back to my energy healer and say, hey, can you help me figure out where the disconnect is, because something doesn't feel right about this. I said, something's got to be off here. Either the information that you're getting is off, or something wasn't being considered in the scientific data.
There's something, yeah. There's forgive me for jumping right in here. There's something I want to just make sure I point out here, which is that in this journey with structured water that I've been on for about 5 years now, there have been these moments where it appears that one piece of data and another piece of data, something's got to be false. And it appears that way because usually it's my mind that's wrapping around it. But between my heart and water and the way life really is, I'm always amazed by the way these things harmonize, and we get to find the truth in the experience. The other thing I want to point out is if anybody wants to follow along the research that you looked at, there'll be a link on the video right now, and you can just click on that link and you can go see the same stuff that Steve saw. So you went back to your energy healer and you shared with him this apparent contradiction, and what happened?
And the most beautiful thing happened. He shared with me, which he hadn't when I originally asked him to test the system that I was setting up, and shared with me that his information was indeed accurate in that in my particular setting, my building, with the people that are in it, with the Wi-Fi that is in existence, with all the different things that are interacting with the water because it's alive, my particular apartment and where my water filter was going to be and how the water was going to work in my system, he said that his number was still accurate, that it started destructuring after 6 hours. But he also said that the scientific data was accurate as well, which was really something I hadn't considered. He said that because of the environment that those tests were done in, he said the water was indeed still structured after 25 hours. So I thought it was a really interesting thing to consider, and what I ended up deciding to do, because I really do believe I choose to believe in the whole energy thing, and that there's much more to us than these physical bodies, and I chose to energetically charge the water so that it would hold that structure longer, and continue to keep the products that I originally purchased.
That's the part that excites me, is you feeling your power to change water. Like, do you think that was possible before our dialogue?
I think that it maybe was possible before our dialogue, but I guess I'd never considered it in that particular scenario, and definitely felt empowered by our conversation, empowered by my healer, that he believed that I could do that. And I have had other experiences where I felt I was energetically changing something or consciously creating something by the intent I was putting into what I was thinking about or what I was doing.
It's just amazing to me that we're having this discussion, and that we get to share this with the world, and that you get to contribute your leadership in this topic. Your leadership as one human being who chooses to know himself as living an energetic experience, and to know himself as ultimately powerful. I just love that to no end. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, I'm happy to share the story. It is amazing that just in the same way that the water was being affected and diminishing more quickly by what some would consider passively, I just as equally felt that I could retain the structure by actively making a conscious choice to energize the water myself with the power of my thought.
That's great. Would you do you feel strong enough in that capability to not have a structuring device and feel like you can structure it?
I never thought about that, but you know what? I think that's something to work towards somewhere along the line. I don't feel ready for that yet. That feels like, if I'm being honest, jumping in the deep end of the pool without having learned how to swim in the shallow end first. But that's something I definitely aspire to, no question about that.
Yeah, right on. Me too. I actually had a guy tell me once, after he heard me on an interview, he called me up and said, "I can teach you to structure water without your devices." I said, "Okay, I'm game. Let's do it." And so we actually led a workshop here in my home with 10 people, and we structured water. And it took a lot of energy from all of us, and it was enough of a process and had enough layers and difficulty that none of the participants, including me, continued to do it afterwards. And so I think you're wise to recognize being in the shallow end before the deep end, because I sometimes get impatient with my evolution and I want to get there now, and that leads to pain and suffering, right? So I like that we have this transition time, and I would imagine there are going to be people in the future who we interact with who we help each other, or they help us see the way that we can eventually structure water without structured devices. And for now, for me, I'm going to keep finding the highest vibration ones that I can and going from there.
I think that's a great place to be right now, and I think you're speaking to me directly when you're saying to not rush through the evolutionary process. I get really excited about this stuff. I get really excited to share it with people, and in that excitement, I can kind of get ahead of myself. So I resonate with what you were speaking to.
You're speaking to me. Takes one to know one, I guess. Well, there are a lot of subtleties of this discussion, and I think we've captured it really well. As we move toward wrapping up, are there any subtleties that you feel like we've missed, or anything that you want to clarify or amplify for people?
No, I don't think so. I feel that the story was pretty well portrayed. Maybe the pieces could have been aligned a little bit more chronologically, but I feel that all the information is definitely there.
Yeah, great. I feel the way too. Thank you very much.